Hey everyone, welcome back to TV Guys, the show where our wit is sharper than Matt's machete. I'm Matt,
I'm Brian.
and I didn't say anything about naked women. Did you think my joke was going to have to do with naked women?
I figured it would have something to do about that. Something about like we're not gonna get naked for chocolate, but
Yeah,
it works. Yeah,
that's the obvious joke because I definitely did think of it. But I'm like, no, let's do something else. And then I still didn't have the self-control to avoid talking about naked women for longer than 10 seconds.
well, anyone who knows Survivor season 6, this is what the season is known for.
It really is.
Yeah. But
And
you mentioned the Matt's. You mentioned Matt's machete, and it was actually Matt who had the machete.
It was. But in fact, with this season being what it's known for, let's real quick, we're going to look back. So last time we talked about Survivor, Brian and I recorded something. This was what we remembered from this season. So go ahead and hit that, Brian. All right. Well, Survivor season 6 in the Amazon. Again, I don't want to be on the side of like, let's talk about naked women. But one of the things I remember.
Yeah. It's a big part of the season.
Exactly. Like so all these survivors on one of the immunity challenge, it's one of those stand on a pole and the last one standing gets immunity challenge. Oh, you guys all have willpower? Well, what if I bring out all these things like a cheeseburger and stuff? And so then there's these two girls that are just like, you're like, we aren't going to go down no matter what. And there's like, oh, well, there's peanut butter. Or something like, if you take off your clothes, we'll get you peanut butter. And so then they took off their clothes and they brought out peanut butter and chocolate, I think. And then they both jumped in and
with that, another little detail. So there's a guy, Butch, who he's like an older, I think he's like a school principal or something. And he's looking down. I remember him when that's happening. He's like, I'm not looking. And someone else is like, I'm looking.
I didn't remember Butch. I had to look it up. I wouldn't have remembered him seeing his.
Yeah. So I'm not going to spoil. I remember clearly. I know the order of the final 5. I remember who wins, and I remember who's the final 5. So I'm not going to spoil that for you guys. But I do remember this is the one where they start out with men versus women for tribes.
I was going to say I thought that was this one.
Yes. And this one, you might know who it is. Has one of my favorite survivors of all time.
Is it Rob?
It is. I like Rob a lot. We'll talk about him next season. And season 5 we had a Brian. In season 6 there's a Matthew.
Oh, look at that! Full circle.
Mm-hmm.
I got that was those were like the biggies I remember. I remember the gender tribes. I remember the naked challenge, and I remembered that Rob. Like, I think Rob was one of those players that was not as smart as he thought he was.
Yes and no. I mean, obviously that, but he also played a really good game, and he came very close to winning. Obviously, okay, I'm spoiling that Rob doesn't win.
Yeah, but I had a feeling like he was one of those guys. Like everyone knew they couldn't trust him, but at the same time, no one voted him out for a while. I thought I don't remember a whole lot. I just remember like he was. If there's a heroes, I think there's a heroes versus villains, and if they brought him back, he would be on the villain side.
Probably, yeah. I mean, Rob does come back in Survivor All Stars.
Okay. Look at that. Knowing things.
Yep. Rob, and there's one other person from Survivor Amazon who comes back from the All Stars.
I can't remember what all these... I didn't even remember Butch. And I don't remember the name of the two ladies. I think one is Jenna.
Yep, Jenna and Heidi.
Jenna and Heidi. Yeah, that sounds right.
And that's also, I think that's all that we had to say about Survivor Season 6 without me saying this person is the winner.
So there you go. Naked women, Matt and Butch, and
burning down the camp. And we talked a little bit about Rob. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the important things. Those are the highlights.
And it's an interesting thing. So with Rob, I think we've talked about it. Rob is now basically like the Survivor podcast. His full-time job is podcasting primarily about Survivor, but about other things.
Mm-hmm.
And back when I was watching Survivor, like in the seasons like 30 to 40, I would listen to his podcast all the time. So I really got to like Rob. And looking back, like it's a lot. He's a much different person as a guy in his 40s who's married with 2 kids than the Rob we see on this show.
You'd really hope so, because he gives off mad 20-year-old bachelor energy in this show.
Yeah, we'll talk about a lot of that. I mean, this is definitely, I think, the safe word to use is a very hormonal season.
It really is. This season was thirsty, man.
Yeah.
And the producers knew it. The producers knew, they're like, all right, we're gonna separate them. We're gonna put them male and female, and like the first big thing of note for, because that's the other thing you talk about with this season, and I think that really helped to contribute to the overall theme, because it just put that in their minds, and like, let's remove you, we'll put you like monks, and you don't even get to look at women unless you're facing against them for challenges, and women, you don't even get to be around men unless the same thing. And let's see how you do for like 2 weeks, really, before they had to merge or a swap.
And right away, Jenna was like, I don't like this because I can't use my womanly wiles on the women. And it seems really shallow, but then you see the guys, and you're like, oh yeah, she has a point. She could definitely manipulate these guys.
And then, like, all they saw was like the glimpse of them on the boat going there, and they're still just like, those women, I miss them, I want to see them again, and like, just the longing they had.
It also just makes me think, like, do these people never think about the fact that everything they say could be shown on a national TV that they're going to watch with their mom and their grandma?
And I've thought that a lot before, but then I'll try and give them the benefit of the doubt, where it's like, how much time did they record over every 3 days, and how many talking heads do they have? And they scoured those to find the 1 10-second clip that, like, this will make people mad, let's put that one in.
Yeah. But not even just in talking heads. Like, then they had the summit thing with Dave and Jenna, and Dave's like, yeah, we talk about Heidi's boobs, we talk about your butt. And it's like, this is wild.
Even in the reunion, when how did that get received at home? Jenna's like, well, my parents weren't proud of it. And Heidi's like, well, I'm a school teacher, and it was a little awkward. And then she like just avoided it. I'm like, did you get fired, Heidi? It sounds, you're not saying it, but it sounds like you might have gotten fired after this,
or quit before she could have gotten fired,
or that.
So Matt, when I remember, even like when we were in our early 20s, I mean, not with you, but like or in high school, I would talk with my friends about girls that were cute, but we would be very like PG. We'd say, oh, so-and-so's cute. I wouldn't go into like specific body parts and stuff.
That's also because we had very Christian moral upbringing. And so we weren't the same with, like, I think a number of these guys, they're used to a different upbringing of it. It was fine to check out women's parts and comment on it. And like, you know, there's been that phrase of like locker room talk thrown around before of like, you know, when a bunch of guys are together to talk about girls, and they'll talk about the parts of the girls that they really like, and they won't be so cordial about it because they'll just kind of let their hair down a little bit,
I suppose. But TV cameras that are going to be showing this to a national audience aren't typically in the locker rooms. At least not locker rooms that I've been in.
Oh, well, they've been in my locker rooms, and it's very awkward. It is funny though. Like the producers knew what they were doing with this, because they just read the human condition, and you know, we don't tend as much anymore the same way, but there still is that traditional, like the way that males are versus the way that females are, and obviously there's exceptions, but there was a lot of this, like, men are more simple in a number of different ways, and so they are able to just kind of like, we're just going to get along, we're not going to talk about super deep stuff, we're here, we're task oriented, we're having a good time. This woman was hot, and so she caught my eye. Let's talk about that. And then these women on the other side, they will talk about things, and like they will be more vulnerable with each other. But with that vulnerability also comes the potential of rejection. And so that's where you get like some of these like the catty terms of women versus women. And I mean, we are better at recognizing this now too, but there was this idea for a long time that the amount of resources allocated to women, and that like women felt like they had to compete with other women. And I'm sure that there is still some of that today. As two men, I don't know if we can specifically speak to that, but I think we're getting better. But you do see that come out a number of times in these all women groups. And so especially back in the early 2000s, there was that still at play for sure.
Yeah, and they even say like they even say like, oh yeah, the younger, prettier girls. And that's not me commenting. That's the quote they used on the show.
Yep.
Went off to shower together because the other girls are not as comfortable with that. But then we never saw the other side of that as well. So I'm not sure if like some of that conflict was just expected or if it actually was a conflict.
They didn't show as well as much of the quote unquote toxic masculinity that I think we would expect to, because there's a little bit of that alpha male dominance, but there wasn't a ton of it. You would think with Alex, Ryan, Dan, and Dave all together, all four of those guys could easily feel like they needed to be that alpha male personality. And maybe it's because we got Ryan and Dan out like really early on that we didn't have that. But there, if anything, there's like Roger, I guess, was the alpha male, and but he's much older, so he's not like I have to prove myself the same way. It's just more get the work done. That's how he asserted his maleness, you know.
Roger was more so like oh man, these kids today have no work ethic. Like, that's more so what Roger is, and it's a little bit of annoying because I remember when I first watched the show. I mean, when the show aired, we were like 15, 14, like. Thinking, oh my gosh, Roger's such a jerk. And I think there is some of that with Roger because he also like he can't treat them like they're his teenage kids. They're all adults. Yeah. But at the same time, I kind of understand him wanting to have work ethic. So I kind of get both sides of it now.
And here's what's funny. I must be like this old soul because as a teen, I would always side more with the older generation. So I was more on like Gene and Janet and what's her name? Joanna. Joanna?
Joanna, yes.
Yeah. I was more on their side than I was, even though the girls were more attractive. And I was more on the Roger, Butch, and I guess Matthew side. Matthew's not like that much older, but he kind of ends up getting a little more lumped in with them for some reason. And like I was more on that side. And I'm like, get the work done. Do what you have to do. Stop being a lazy bum. You're not here on vacation. Like I fully. And so then when rewatching it now, I'm a little bit more like, okay, Roger. I thought I liked Roger more than I think I do. But I can definitely understand some of his points in work ethic.
Yeah, it's a back and forth. But no, I was the opposite. When I was 15 watching the show, I was like, I was looking at all the 20-something people be like, oh my gosh, they're so cool and adult. I can't wait till I'm like that. That's what was going through my 14, 15-year-old head. And now I look at these guys and like, you're all idiots.
Yeah. But we did, so we talk about that alpha male personality. One of the things that does come out in it is there was some inherent sexism. And I feel like there was a lot. It's a different sexism for women because of the women of like, we can wrap the men around our fingers. That's a little bit of the sexism, but men were a lot more like, these women can't compete with us. We're men. We're not going to lose. And especially like how Daniel, I think, really was the one who was the most like that if I remember right, of just him and Ryan not being able to complete that first challenge and just slowing them way down on that balance beam and had to keep going back and back. And I'm really surprised because it was more Dan, as I'm watching it, it was more Dan's fault than it was Ryan's, I thought. But Ryan was the first one voted out, so
those two kind of blend together for me, honestly.
Yeah. Ryan's jaw though, like that was his jaw dropped when he was the one voted out, and I'm like, I've never seen such a shocked reaction because even when they are shocked, they usually play it close to the chest, and Ron's just like, what?
Yeah, but going back to like what you're saying, these have to be Survivor fans to go on the show because we've had 5 seasons before of women who are also showing they can be good at challenges. Why do they assume, oh, women can't do anything? Have you watched this show?
Matthew didn't.
No.
But he also didn't sound off about it either, so.
No. I mean, because there might be some challenges that are geared toward men or geared towards women, but for the most part, like, don't just assume that because someone's a woman or because they're a man, they can't be good at challenges. Underestimating your enemy is like what they tell. I mean, in any competition is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. And so, men underestimating the strength of the women, and the women maybe underestimating the intelligence of the men. Especially with like Rob. Rob was the one that was really the smartest of the men. And like, not that any of them were so much stupid, but Rob definitely, he understood the assignment. He came into the game knowing what he needed to do. And the way he played pre-merge was really smart, where he's not making any waves. He's not making any moves. He's just making sure he's on the right side of things and he's staying alive. And then post-merge, now he knows where everyone's at, and he's had a lot of talk with different people, and he's able to make the moves he needs to make post-merge to make it to the as far as he did.
Well, I think until he gets voted out, I think he's on the right side of every vote.
Yeah. And we'll talk about it later, but you know who's on the wrong side of every vote? Butch.
Really?
Butch, so many times. If you go look at Butch's voting record, I think like he voted for the person who was getting voted out like maybe 3 times total. It was always like if they needed the numbers, they'd get him in there. But if they needed the numbers, but not specifically Butch's vote, they didn't tell him. Like when they vote, I think it was Dina was one where they didn't tell. I think. Christy. Christy was one where he voted with Christy, and no one told him that they're voting Christy off. And so he had that face where he's just like, "Wait, what?" Yeah. And even the final vote of the 6-1 for Jenna, guess who's the one person who didn't vote for Jenna to be the sole survivor? Butch. He has a terrible voting record. If he's on your side with voting, the other person's getting it. All right, that's just how it's gonna go.
I knew that Jenna didn't win out all the jury votes, but I thought Matt got a couple of them.
He only got the one.
It's funny talking about Butch. I remembered Butch coming in here because I remembered the burning down the camp, and I remembered when he's like, "I'm not looking." What about the getting naked? Yeah. But really, for most of the show, Butch is in the background. You could forget that he's even there for most of this whole season.
Yeah, he's one that I wanted to talk about. We're going to talk more about like different players in just a couple of moments, but Butch was one I wanted to talk about for that reason of like, if I've ever seen someone who just was there like to fill out the numbers, it was Butch. He never did anything to tick people off so much, even though, I guess he was the reason they burnt down the camp, and maybe that's why he was the first out of the 4. But he never really was so outlandishly aggressive for like needing to get voted off. He was there, and he made it to Final 4 by just he was Bidening it, to quote the New Girl episode.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, he was aligned with Roger, but Roger got all the hate, so he was just he got away with it.
Man, the chain episode though. Like when they're talking about this, where Rob's like, "Hey, Matt, I will tell you the things that you need to know, and you're going to vote with me." And then Matt kind of like does this mentoring thing with Butch, and those two are on the canoe. And Matt's like, "All right, I'll tell you. There's some things I'm not going to tell you, but there are things I'm going to tell you." And then Butch is like, "I get it. I'm with you. The chain." And like, they act like, okay, we're on the inside. And then the other 4 or 5 are just laughing at him on shore.
It's so true. I mean, it's just, and Matt, I feel like Matt was only playing the game in like the last couple days of the whole shoot.
Yeah. Well, let's talk real quick about kind of that tribe swap and how different things affected before we get into the players and the winning and Jenna's win. So about which episode was this? That was episode 5. So we only had the 4 episodes really of men versus women. And then they did. You knew what was going to happen when they have Jenna and Dave show up.
Well, Jenna didn't know.
I know she obviously didn't, but she should have. Yeah, I get that maybe she didn't see every single one because they filmed this during the airing of Survivor Thailand. But they'd seen Africa where there's a swap. They saw Marquesas where there was a swap. They saw. Was there one in the?
No, Africa was the first swap.
Yeah, Africa and Marquesas. Was there any other one? No. It was just those 2. But they did 2 in a row of some sort of tribe swap. And so then they're like, "Hey, you 2, we're gonna reward you two. You guys can go out and we're not gonna make you do anything. Like, be smarter than this. You know where you're
Yeah.
at. Something's gonna happen. And Jenna's just like so excited to finally talk to a boy that she can't
Yeah.
hold back all of this information.
Well, even if they weren't going to switch, she would know that they'd eventually merge. She's basically like, okay, here's all of our tribe dynamics. Here's who doesn't like who. Here's where all the alliances are. Here's all of the information you need. And Dave's like, well, I'm going to tell her some stuff, so but I'm not going to like lay out all of everything.
Yeah. And I think Dave, even though he had that information, he still, obviously Jenna is the one who wins. And so
Yeah.
Dave still didn't put together the right team. And like stealing Heidi first, was that the smart idea? Or was it like, because I don't think he picked a good team. I don't think he walked away the winner in this, because even though both sides voted out a woman after this little merge or swap that they did,
Yeah.
they still didn't do the guys pick off the girls. Rob was off on his own, manipulating everything away from this other group. And he was the one, and it's actually really that tribe that became the strength, even though Matt was still like, whatever. Like, that tribe was the one that kind of stole the game away. Dave's tribe got whittled away afterwards, right?
Yeah, I think it was. I think because that's when Rob and Dina got together. Which for a while, Rob and Dina were like the strategic pairing couple.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dave's tribe. I think they were still thinking like, because it was what Dave and Roger and Butch.
Yeah, Dave, Roger, and Butch were on that side, and then they had Gene and they had Christy.
Yeah, and I feel like those three guys just had the thought like, well, we have the majority, so they're just going to fall in line and go with us because we're the ones in charge. And yeah. I think having the numbers and like being in charge are not the same thing, and I think that was their downfall. They got too confident.
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at all the people that they had of Dave, Roger, Gene, Christy, and Heidi was the only one that like did strategy of that group, and hers was just get back to the others. All five of the other ones didn't have too much of an aggressive strategy. They were, let's just make sure we don't get voted. Let's just get to the merge and have the guys whatever. And all of them, they didn't go very far. And I mean, yeah, sure, Butch made it to the Final Four, but did he really deserve it? he easily could have gotten voted out way earlier if Rob didn't panic a couple different times. So
Butch got kept around because he was not a threat. He was not going to be the one that was going to make a play. Like you could trust where you knew where Butch was going to go.
Exactly.
So made him lower priority. But I mean, he would have had to have started making actual moves way earlier to actually have a chance of getting jury votes, I think. Except for maybe he maybe would have gotten Rogers if Rogers was on the jury.
Yeah, exactly. And so he wasn't the strategist. And Christy kind of had a little bit of that same thing. And the only reason she got voted was because of her hesitancy. And so
she even said that. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was just that I'm not going to rock the boat sort of person. Same with Butch. And when you have so many people that are rocking the boat, you need to also kind of respond a little bit so that they don't control the game. And I think that's why one of the reasons Jenna won is because she wasn't super aggressive in her strategy, but she was very clear cut in where she stood. And she wasn't like told who to vote. She had her own agenda that she enacted as best as she could, but she wasn't passive in the way Matthew or Butch was. But she also wasn't conniving in the way Dina and Rob were.
True. Yeah, that was a good one. Good combo there. And I think she definitely did deserve the win.
Yeah, I do too. I think she was a really good player, and she like. If you're saying she doesn't deserve the win, it's because you saw the early days, Jenna, where maybe for the first 3 episodes, when you're saying, hey, this is the one who's going to win, you're not saying this woman deserves it. She deserved it for sure, especially she won, 4 out of the 7 post-merge?
She won a lot of immunities, which I didn't remember that.
Yeah, neither did I. And even give one away. She was the first survivor in history to give her immunity necklace away to someone else.
Which I also did not remember.
Yeah, neither did I beforehand.
But it's probably like when you're talking about Christy, when Christy got voted out, it's very emotional. And, a lot of people loved Christy because it was, for one, she was, she had the endearing part of her that she was deaf. And
Yeah.
two, I think some people loved that she wasn't taking her clothes off and like sexualizing herself.
Mhm.
So then when she got off and she voted off and she like is crying, he'd be like, the evil stepsisters are never going to win the million. I think some people like rallied around her and being like, yeah, she's the good one. How dare. And then by watching, it's like, no, they would have taken her, but she wasn't willing to say, yeah, I'm on your side. And I'm a lot more like sympathetic to Jenna's win now, looking back, realizing like, oh yeah, like she's just playing the game and doing it in a way that she can.
Yeah, I was more sympathetic to Christy post merger because she was on the outside, but like this, I don't want to sound mean or callous, and we only get a small glimpse. But from the glimpse that I saw pre-merge, when she's talking about like being on the outside and being kept at arm's length, there's some of it that I'm like, did she bring the preconceived notion because she's experienced that in her life? She's experienced that of being in the deaf community and not always knowing how to like people not knowing how to treat someone who's deaf around them and to like cater to them. Did she bring that pain of being on the outside into this game and expect to be on the outside? Because I think early on with the girls, I didn't see as much like purposeful exclusion, but I did for sure see it with 100% Jenna and Heidi, and I think Shauna too. And so I did see it with those three younger ones. I didn't see it with the older ladies.
No, and I didn't see it with the guys either.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, early on, I felt like maybe she was just like bringing that into it. I'm like, well, if you are thinking that's going to happen, actually you end up manifesting stuff like that. But she did get screwed over in the end. And I kind of think about like Christy, where it's like, if I'm trying to plan for Rob and, who's the best person to go to the end with? Cause he's like, oh, maybe I think Jenna, I have the best shot with. I'm like, I kind of think it was Christy might've been his best shot because if for whatever reason, Heidi and Jenna were little sistering her, where it's like, you don't belong here with us. They never said that, but there's just this demeanor that they had that I'm like, if she made it to the final two, I don't think they'd vote her. And it's not that Christy did something wrong. It's just Heidi and Jenna just didn't have this room for Christy in their lives or in the game. And that's what I was picking up post-merger from her. I don't know if you felt the same.
No, but you have a good point now that you mentioned it. But if you figure that in the scenario where it's Rob and Christy, even if she doesn't get Jenna and Heidi's votes, I think Christy has a good chance of getting the rest of the votes, though, or at least a good number of the rest of them. So maybe she
would have gotten Matt's. I think no matter what, Matt would have voted for him for whatever reason. And then I think he could have gotten Butch's, and that would be the four you need. It's just really like Alex and Dave don't think would have voted Rob no matter who he was against. And then I don't remember who would be the other two in that. I'm blanking on the other jury members for whatever reason.
Well, Matt, Dave, Butch, Alex.
Oh, Dina. He would have had Dina's vote.
Oh yeah, he would have. Yeah.
Unless he was the one who purposely screwed her over. But I don't know.
True, but did Dina know that Rob was in on voting her out?
I'm not sure. Because at the time it was 8 vote. It was 8 votes, and so all that they needed was 5 to go that way. And so Christy voted for Alex, and Dina voted for Alex. And if Rob would have voted for Alex, it still wouldn't have mattered. Dina still would have gotten out because the other 5 voted her.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point.
All right. Well, let's keep talking about. Well, actually, let's talk about some of these other players real quick, and then we'll talk about like what are some of the best, what are the strategies that hit. And so we haven't really talked too much. We've thrown Matt's name around.
Yeah.
We haven't talked a ton about Matt. And one thing I wanted to bring up was because you can't talk about Matt without talking about his mental lapses and the insanity. And Jeff brings it up in the reunion. He's like, was that an act? He's like, yeah, I kind of overplayed that. I thought that I would be unassuming if people thought I was crazy. And Alex is like, there's no way that you are faking that insanity. What do you think, Brian?
I think he may have exaggerated a little bit, but I think you can see his personality come through, and it's like watching. It's like I've known guys like Matt, like not so much like the crazy, but like he wasn't the one going like, oh yeah, women, all this kind of stuff. Like he's kind of like this very specific brand of nerdiness. Like he strikes me as the type of guy who loves anime. If that, I don't know if that makes sense.
what, what a way to pigeonhole someone. Like, let me be mean, but in a really weird way.
But no, I'm not knocking anime. Like, but okay.
Oh yeah, you're definitely not. You're comparing that. Like, this is the sort of guy who watches anime, and you have like a little wink.
No, like just as like I've known guys like Matt, and I feel like they're not the big like popular kids social situation is not where they thrive. Because I'm a huge nerd. I'm just a slightly different brand of nerd myself.
Some would even call these people losers. Not me, but some lesser people. They'd make fun of them. I'm not doing that. I'm a good guy.
No, I'm not saying he's a loser. I'm just saying I just maybe that's a bad way to describe it. Like I've known guys like Matt, and I feel like
No, it's a great way to describe it, but you gotta own what you're saying.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I'm not meaning it as an insult, but it's true.
Oh no, Matt is hilarious, and like there's when his mom came and he spent time with her, that was very telling of Matt's upbringing. And I love. Okay, there's this line in the last episode when Matt's like thinking through how things have been and like the end of it, like how Survivor has changed him, and he's like, I think I'm gonna appreciate life more. Yeah. And I'm gonna learn. I'm gonna go watch more TV. Like that's his walk away from Survivor. Like I'm not gonna take like 20 hours in a weekend to learn Swedish anymore. I'm gonna watch more TV. Like who has this as their walk away for? This is what I learned from this life-changing experience. Watch more television.
Well, when the other option is spend 20 hours on a weekend learning Swedish, I don't know which one's worse.
Get a hobby, man. Learn to whittle. Like play an instrument. Go on long walks. Go hike or something. Just watching TV, there's no problem. You and we wouldn't have a podcast if we didn't watch TV. But like, those are your two options. There's other options in the world.
I think he meant in general, just like take it easy and like don't like. You can relax a little bit more. I think that's what he was trying to say. But I agree. Like he's like, oh, interesting. Here, like I went on Survivor and I spent a week out in like this crazy grueling experience. I need to go back to the couch, man. That's not what you hear often on the show.
I reached the end of my life and realized I didn't watch enough television. Okay, well,
it's like there's I think it's a Simpsons quote with a comic book guy, and it's a flash forward to his life in a deathbed. He's like, I spent my whole life with my nose in a comic book. Life well spent.
Exactly. So Matt was a unique character, and I did not remember him being in the final two.
No, I knew that, yeah.
Especially because like his game was on life support for so much post merger. It was what really solidified him. What he won immunity when he needed it. It was the bugs challenge that he ate. And this is a fun time to bring up Roger and Dina real quick because Roger and Dina are the same person on the opposite tribe and gender, and especially what. I don't know how many people recognize the irony of this, but Roger was in a challenge where he's like, I didn't give it my all because I thought I had a little bit more time here. And I didn't think immunity was so important. And he gets voted off. And Dina even rubs it in his face in what she was saying when she's reading it off. And she's kind of cocky about it like, haha, you didn't realize it, but we got you. Dina did the exact same thing because when it was down to her and Matt, she's like, she didn't even go for that final swallow because she's like, this is too gross. I don't need immunity that bad. But believe it or not, you did. And so
Yeah.
she ends up going out the same way Roger did. And it was kind of funny.
Yeah, I've heard this kind of thing described as like the same person in a different font.
Yeah.
Because like they say, oh, Roger would never vote for a man for a woman in the finals. Would Dina vote for a man in the finals if she had?
Yeah. I mean, I could give her. I think she would vote for Rob if it was Rob because their alliance. But I think, yeah, I think she would have voted Jenna for any other guy that made it there.
True. Yeah, I remember because I almost gave it away last season when I said like, hey, because in that intro clip that we played of us talking about Survivor 6, and I said, well, last season there was a Brian, this season there's a Matt, and I was gonna rub it in and say, well, Brian won, but Matt got runner up. But then it's like, oh, maybe Matt doesn't know that he gets to the runner up.
I didn't, so I appreciate you saving that joke, just sitting on that for a good month and a half. Appreciate that.
Yeah. More like 2 or 3 months, I think.
We have other players to talk about, but I really quickly, because since we're on the topic of Dina, I really liked Dina's play, the way that she was, and especially with how it complimented Robert. Why did I don't know.
Probably.
But Rob and Dina, I know we just said Dina and Roger are like the same, that same sort of thing, but the play style of Dina and Rob were very similar. And they were pretty smart, and they understood what was going on with the game in a really good way. It was just not realizing how much of the emotions Jenna and Heidi were bringing to their gameplay too. And that was their big mistake, Dina's big mistake specifically. But honestly, if Dina didn't get voted out when Matt won the immunity, that I think it would have been Dina and Rob in the final two. That if they would have both voted out Matt, then they still would have stayed alive and connived enough to get out Alex, to get out Heidi and Jen. And because at that point, getting out Alex, Heidi and Jenna still would have been like trying to do this coup. And then I think that would have just broken off any ties Dina had with those two. And that Rob and Dina would have been smart enough to realize they needed to get Alex out before they reached Final Five, because Alex would vote with Heidi and Jenna every time.
So. Yep, and you need to get Alex out because with Alex in the game, with Heidi and Jenna in his pocket, like no one else is going to make it to the end. And so that's what I think people are like, especially the girls at first were like, oh my gosh, they turned on Alex. I'm so pissed at Rob. But Rob had to, because there was no future for Rob or Dina in the game with Alex in the game.
100%. And he realized that when Alex was being honest about it. And I know, Alex's jury stuff and like kind of his sound bites, he felt kind of bitter in the way that he was saying it, like talking about like the integrity. And when he was bringing that up, I'm like, Jenna and Matt did both play with integrity, but it didn't mean that they didn't lie. It's kind of like people act like integrity is like when you're playing poker and that the other person should say, before I show you my cards, I just want you to know I have 3 of a kind, or I have a royal flush or whatever. And that you're supposed to announce what you've got holding in your cards. That's not what it is. Playing with integrity is like recognizing what the game is, but not like, pulling an ace out of your sleeve or siphoning chips off the table. It's not playing in a way that's purposefully malicious. It's playing in a way true to the game and true to who you are. And even though Jenna lied at a couple different times, she had integrity of who she was. Even though Matt lied a couple times, he had integrity of who he was. In fact, even Rob had integrity. He just was a flip-flopper. And he played it according to what he felt like the guidelines of the game were. And so I didn't like Alex being like, no one plays with integrity. Like, well, you're just defining it in a crappy way. It's a game.
This is I believe I talked about this back when we were talking about Lex in Africa, and I'll talk about it's one of my biggest pet peeves in Survivor is the bitter jury members who like put themselves on the moral high horse, like you don't deserve to be here because you're like you're so immoral, and like how dare you like expect me to vote for one of you guys? And really what's like is like you were doing the same thing and you just lost at it. So just shut up. Like you're playing the same game. You're not morally superior. You're just butthurt that you didn't win.
I love there's nothing more like telling to what you're saying than Heidi's stuff in the
Oh,
jury.
I was gonna get that too. Yeah,
Heidi's like, which person would maybe deserve more to be in your spot? And both of them say Rob, and then she's just like, anyone else? And
yeah.
she so clearly
Like,
wants
is it?
them to say, no, you deserved it, Heidi. You
Yeah,
should have
is
been
it?
here.
It was so cringy. It's like, is it me? Did I do good? Am I a good player?
Yeah. And Jeff is just like, I believe they answered it.
I don't know. There's a long silence, and like everybody knows. But Jeff's like, I think they. I wasn't sure if we were gonna wait to talk about that until we got to the finale, but I definitely note to that. That happened. I'm thinking about that happened in season 2 when it was Nick who said to Colby and Tina, and they took the bait. I remember Colby's like, "Well, I think you would probably be in the finals for sure." Like he knew he understood the assignment, but these guys were like, "No, I don't care." Not even Jenna, who was her best friend the whole game, didn't say you should win.
And it's also really funny too, like maybe not Matt as much, because Matt actually did really, like, I don't want to say idolize Rob and his play, but he really admired it. But Jenna hated it, and for her to be like, you know what, Rob actually would deserve a spot in these final 2 because of how he played and the strategy he employed, like, that's a huge compliment and very telling of Jenna. And to reveal as like, you know what, that's a very legitimate gameplay strategy, and he did well with it. He didn't win, but he really came close.
Mm-hmm. And the reasons that he would have been deserving are the reasons he didn't make it, because they didn't want to go against him.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a fine line too, because like there is emotions in it. Alex is he's a never robber. He would have never voted Rob, 100%. But like, and Heidi and Jenna, if they're both on the jury, I don't know if either one of them would have voted for Rob because of the same thing.
Well, I don't know, because they were pissed at Rob at first, but they came around towards the end. And they were voting with Rob for Christy and for Butch, and so maybe not Heidi, but I think especially Jenna and Rob were kind of able to repair their friendship by the end of the game. So I think you're right. Alex is a never Rob one, because you can see how still bitter he was.
Yep.
But I think he's the only 100% not robber that would be on there.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I guess I have nothing to say. It's always fun to like think through these things. Like, hey, how would this have played out differently if so and so would have happened? Is there any like scenarios you're like, this was a huge moment that if this would have changed, the winner or the final 2 would have been different? Anything you could point to?
I don't think of anything specific. I mean, the biggest one I think is getting rid of Alex, because I think if they don't keep him in check, then he runs the game.
Yeah. I think the final 2 immunities for Jenna too were super important, were vitally important. I think she would have gone with either of those 2.
Yeah. Well, and that final challenge, I mean, Matt pulled the Richard Hatch move of stepping down on purpose because he didn't want to make the choice, and it worked. And in both cases, it worked out for him, that they made it to the final 2 because of it.
Oh, did he go down on purpose?
Yeah, he said that. He said, like, I could have gone. Matt said that he stepped down on purpose. I think, I forget what the reasoning was, but I think it was because he didn't want to make the choice to vote the last jury member out, and because he was certain that both of them would choose him, which they did. Of course, it ended up working that Matt lost the finals where Richard won, but in both cases, it got them into the final 2.
I'm not sure if Rob would have taken Matt. Well, maybe he would have, because just remember when he was talking about like saying, "Hey, Jen, I have the best chance with you," but then he would have maybe flopped too many times and would have lost the Matt vote if he would have voted him out. So,
well, I think Jenna obviously gets Alex and Heidi's votes, and Jenna, I mean, did play. I mean, she has the immunities under her belt. She has more strategy, even though like people like to say, "Oh, all she did was get naked." No, she actually had some strategy. It came out a little bit later in the game. So I think, just from the outsider, I think that Matt would have been the one to go with for Rob, but you don't know for sure.
Yeah, it's true. You don't know. We don't have a time machine. because that technology hasn't been invented yet.
No,
All
it's
right.
not, and it's not like there's hundreds and hundreds of hours of Rob talking on a podcast about Survivor. Oh wait, there is, but I'm sure there's stuff in there. But I'm not going to dig through all the archives of Rob as a podcast.
Man, and if we're talking about like a star of the season, Jenna, whenever you have the Sole Survivor, they're always a star of the season. But
Yeah.
just like how Africa was Lex's season, this was Rob's season. And even though he didn't win,
Absolutely.
he was the one who made compelling television post merge.
Mhm. Well, and this is also telling. So both Rob and Lex were the third place finisher.
Yep.
And I want to say it's like season 13 to 14, something like it's somewhat when in the great Pantheon of Survivors early on, they switched from a final 2 to a final 3. I want to say season 13 is the first one where it's actually 3 of them in the finals, because it just, that last challenge gives the last challenge winner so much power.
Yeah. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, for most of Survivor, like out of like 45 seasons, it's only like a third of it, or even less now that they go in there, that it switches. And then after they do the season, final 3 becomes the standard after season 13, and they go back to a final 2 a couple times here and there as like a novelty. But that's definitely a split from early Survivor to late Survivor.
Well, now I know. I don't remember where. I think I stopped watching after All Stars. Maybe I watched another season, but I don't remember any Survivor past All Stars.
Oh, okay. Well, you're missing some good ones. I at one point I tried to figure out, like, well, if you break down the seasons, what would be like the first, like the eras of Survivor, and I definitely think that, you know, Borneo through All Stars is like the classic era where it was like like TV heightened of their popularity, and then it ended with All Stars because like everyone remembered all 7 seasons going into All Stars. I still think there are some amazing seasons in like the 9 through 20 as well. There's some duds in there, but there's some good ones as well.
Actually, I think I did watch a few past that. I don't remember much. I remember there's one season where, and maybe it was the one after All Stars, where one tribe pretty much lost like every challenge before the merge. Was that like one right after?
No, that was 10. All Stars is 8, so there's one in the middle.
And then I think there was another one where they brought back like one person for each tribe to kind of be like their tribe lead from like previous Survivor, and then the rest of them were new.
Yep, that was season 11. So the season where like one tribe got decimated, that was season 10. Season 11, the last 2 of that losing tribe, that like who were like the underdogs, those 2 people got brought back in season 11. So those 2, they were in season 10 and 11.
Nice.
They did back-to-back seasons.
Boy, that would be demoralizing.
Yeah. And then you mentioned in your recap, like, oh, if they did as heroes villains, they did. Season 20 is Survivor Heroes versus Villains, and it was like Boston Rob and some of like the notoriously like black hat kind of survivors. They were in the villain side, and they brought back like Colby and Rupert and some other people like that for the hero side.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of decimating a tribe, this is the first season where one tribe wasn't completely taken out post-merge. Because like every other season of Survivor, there's always one tribe that ends up being the one that they're gone by the time that the final 2 roll around. And this one, we had Matt and Jenna, and they both were on opposite tribes to begin with. And so a representative from each tribe made it to the final 2.
Yeah. And I don't think the girls were ever gonna completely do that, because they liked Alex, they liked Rob, but the guys like Matt, Butch, and Roger, I think they would have been like, yeah, let's take the guys to the end. I think they were definitely still on that wavelength. They just lost.
Yeah, sucks to suck.
We didn't mention this is kind of backtracking a little bit, but it was so funny in we're talking about like splitting up like the guys and the girls. They had that, and they called it out in the episode. Shauna was like, "Oh, I'm so weak and depressed. I can't go on." And then like the guys show up, and it's like, "Woo, awesome! Yay, waving my arms. This is so fun." And Dina's like, "Okay, all she needed was some testosterone in the camp, and then she's suddenly better."
Absolutely. And there wasn't any guys that were like being as dramatic as that, but there was definitely a pep up from the guy. When Alex and Rob, they walk in, they're a little bit more peppy than they were just a couple days before, sitting with all the guys.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
But it just shows how important it is to have people of the opposite gender in our lives.
Yeah.
Making sure we have.
And another random thought is, did it bug you? Like, did Dave's voice bug you the way it bugged me?
A little bit.
It's like, it's like I can't describe it, but like granted, he is a rocket scientist. They kept saying Dave's the rocket scientist, but he kept making it seem like he is like the knower of all wisdom. And he's like, well, you see, the guys are cool because we have all the muscle. And I just imagine him being like, well, you see, without science, the rockets don't go.
They no go space. Dave, are you okay, man? Having a stroke there?
Like, is he a rocket scientist the way that like some people get honorary degrees from Harvard? Like, you can have the title, but you're not going to build NASA's space shuttle.
Every time they showed Dave and then rocket scientist, it always had that in parentheses, like a rocket scientist. We just gave him this. He kept showing up, and we're like, all right, we're going to call you that. Here's your job title. Don't touch anything, but you can sit at the desk there. Cool, guys.
Or like, this is dark, but they should say like, he had a rare disease as a child, so we decided to do a Make-A-Wish and give him rocket scientist, and then he got better.
The Make-A-Wish job title? All right, what do you want, son? I just want to be a rocket scientist. A lot of people want to meet like John Cena or any rocket scientist. Okay. All right.
It's like, this kid's got 2 months to live. Sure, make him a rocket scientist. But then he miraculously gets better.
And no one had the balls to fire him. We can't fire Dave. He's a Make-A-Wish kid. Dang it.
Not little Davy.
Not Davy. Good gravy. All right. Well, let's talk about not Dave things for a minute. Yeah. So, we had in this season, so like the editors, they always do a good job because they have to sift through so much crap, and that in and of itself is a process. And so like you forgive them for not like going above and beyond creatively, but this season there's a couple moments where it's like the editors wanted to flex like their creative muscles, and there's a couple things that they did that I'm like, wow, that's actually really good. That's great editing. Like early on, when it's the women are still just the women's camp and the men's camp, there's this time where it shows them kind of working, but they kind of cut this remix song using the sounds of the camp. And so like Christy's like hitting with a machete, and it uses that as like the ching, 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 and then like it adds like something else, kind of like we've seen it in a lot of different movies where they're kind of adding layers of different sound effects. And someone in the editing booth was like, guys, I know this is gonna be so much work, because it really is, it's a ton of work. I know this is so much more work, but let's do this for this segment. And they went with it, and it really stood out, and it was a great piece of editing.
That is and there's a lot of work, and it gives this the more authentic feel than just background music. If it's because the sounds match with what they're physically doing, it just kind of like it gives you more immersive, puts you in the environment.
Yeah, the women became natural Foley artists without even realizing it.
Yeah, but I gotta say, so for our listeners, sometimes Matt will or me will put like an outline of like, this is what we're going to talk about, and you said editing. And when you said editing, I thought you were going to say like at certain points they really played up in editing the over sexualizing of the women, like the shampoo commercial. Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
absolutely.
Because they have the girls were all like taking like showers in the of course they have everything blurred out, but they didn't just show that. They showed it with like longing slow motion with music going like. It's like,
And the cameramen, when they're filming, they know it's like, all right, for this shot, I'm gonna start at her calves, and I'm just gonna slowly go up the body as she's just pouring water down and scrubbing, and then they're gonna use that one.
Also, how far away are the cameramen, do you think? Do you think they're like right up there, or do you think they're farther away zooming in?
Both. I think there's definitely close-ups, and because they can't be too close up because they don't want to be in the shot of other cameras.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's like, it makes you think like they're going to turn and be like, that's why I use Dove body wash.
Strong enough for a man, made for a woman.
Or in that scene, like we talked about when the guys show up at the camp after the switch, and Jana is like, awesome, yay. And they have like upbeat trumpet, like ska music, like, doo-doo-doo, yeah, this is so cool, upbeat, young people.
Well, what was the ska song that you just played there?
You're like, doo-doo-doo-doo. I don't know. It's like, if you look, there's like upbeat trumpet sounds in that moment, and I definitely noticed it. Like, okay, they're going for a vibe here. So when you said you were talking about editing, I thought that was the kind of stuff you were talking about. But yeah, but it's just, this show would be interesting to edit.
There's another one that I had as an example that is also not as perverted as you, Bryant. No, I mean,
this show was perverted.
it was. The producer's like, we know what we got. We're gonna fixate on this. Like, this is for sure what we're gonna. Before I even say the other one that I had, there's some of the stuff that they do is like so mean. Like when all of them come back because they're drunk from like their time with the family members, and they like cut away from Matt and his mom and the time that they're having, and they're like, here, back at camp, and they're like, Butch soiled himself. Like, that's so mean. Like, if that happens because someone gets drunk, first of all, his body fat content is like at -3% right now after being in the Amazon for so long. And so of course he's not used to what he would drink at home and can't handle the same sort of liquor content. And so like people make mistakes when they are drunk, and to highlight be like, yep, he sold himself on or on national TV for millions to see. Even if he did, like, because there's also, not for sure he did, but even if he did, how terrible are you, producers?
Because that's not, it's not important to the story of like the votes and anything, so you didn't have to show that.
Exactly.
That could have just been the people on there knew that, yeah. But as you're talking, another one talking about Butch, they also had like foreboding horror music as we're watching the camp burn while they're at the challenge.
And that was the editing the other one I wanted to talk about, because I thought that was a really smart piece of editing to be cutting back and forth, because what we do see is we see the reward that Matt and Rob have, and they're lighting up this grill. And so they're starting this fire to cook their food. And then it has this juxtaposition of that versus what's happening at camp. And I'm like, this is actually a really smart pairing to have. Look at this fire being good for them and bad for the camp, and that back and forth. I was like, that's a smart way to kind of highlight both of those things.
That is true, yeah. And that was another thing that I remembered was the camp burning. And I think it's at least it happened late in the game where like they were already like, I think maybe a week away from being done with the game, or maybe even less. It's not like they had to go through the whole game with like rebuilding an entire shelter.
Yeah, because it was about the same point in the game in Survivor Australia when their camp got flooded and their stuff got washed away, right? There's still like about 5 or 6 people left, and that was it.
Yeah.
So, second disaster that we had, not including people, not including Michael falling into a fire or the other injury.
And this is another thing interesting. So most seasons early on, this is something I like about early Survivor that they don't do anymore in the current seasons. That they used to have like the last 2 or 3 people go on this like journey, and they like collect everyone's torches, and they like have like flashback to all the previous survivors. They didn't do that, but they did have them like write everyone's names on a post, and they did that with like they had flashbacks to all the previous survivors going up. Yeah. And I'm wondering, did the producers tell them to do that, or if they didn't do that, would they have just not had that section because they didn't have an organic like show reason to do that.
Yeah. And even then they skipped some names too. They didn't show
They did?
every single one.
Oh, I thought they did.
So it made me feel like that was a Matt Jenna decision because I
Mhm.
mean, what else are you going to do that last day? You're not going to keep building up for other day. Like
Yeah.
you're not here much longer. You're saying goodbye to stuff. You burned you burned. Okay, we're going to get into our favorite moments and there's one that was just actually really funny of them lighting the canoe on fire.
Yeah.
And so Matt pours all of this flammable liquid on there, and they're gonna do this pyre on
Yeah.
the boat and then send it out. And so there's like the music, and they do the slow motion, and then Matt brings the torch over, but there's too much of that lighter fluid, and just this huge fireball like over his face, and he's like reacting in slow motion. And like this was supposed to be a lot more majestic, and it's like this actually ends up being a fire hazard, and he looks like a
Yeah.
fool.
I was also thinking every season they always say like, "Hey, if you want to bid on items from this
Yep.
season of Survivor," I'm like, are the producers like, "Oh no, we were going to make money on that."
We're going to give it to kids in Africa.
I don't know if they still do, but they would always like take apart this like their tribe or their tree mail or their camp or something,
Yeah.
and they would auction it off.
Yeah. I actually had the same thought too, but I was like, well, they still got other things. I know that the things they hold the votes in, they sent that off too.
Yeah.
So let's move in real quick because we already kind of hit this, and we've talked a lot about this, but some favorite moments. Are there some favorite moments in this season that we haven't talked about that you wanted to highlight?
Well, some of talked about that the challenge with the peanut butter and chocolate. It was interesting because like they didn't have to get naked for it because I mean the thing wasn't you have to take your clothes off. The thing is just jump down, give up your immunity, and it's like. But I think they made the comment like, "Oh, I'm so hungry, I would." And I've heard reports that like after they said, "Oh, I'd get naked for chocolate and peanut butter," that Jeff Probst was like off camera, "Get chocolate and peanut butter right now."
Yeah, because I mean he brought that out pretty early. Yeah. And I think the reason for like the nudity that they're bringing it up is that wasn't something that he sat and waited, and then it was like at the 2-hour mark, then he'd bring that out. That was because they said they're going to get nude, we're going to bring that out right away early on in the challenge. Because I don't think they even lasted 30 minutes. I think it was less than that because Roger was 30 minutes and he was in, and they went out before he did. So,
which that was the other thing I was going to bring up. So Roger, he knows he's not going to last. But if you know that they're doing this thing, they told him, like, hey, there's going to be temptations with food. You're in the Amazon with no food. I would be like, okay, if I know I'm not going to last, I'm going to wait till they offer me something. So at least I can get some food out of this. He's like, nah, I don't care. I'm just going to jump in.
Like, for me, if I was in that challenge, the fear of the water and not knowing what's deeper than the surface level of the water would stop me from jumping in. Like, Jeff even says something. He's like, make sure you swim to the boat pretty fast because you've seen what's in this water. And then it does like this cut of like showing this alligator that from B-roll footage, like or crocodile because it's Amazon. Yeah. It's like I would have just been glued to that pole. That even when I would have won the challenge, I'd have been like, "Can you send a boat to come get me, please? I'm not jumping in there."
Yes, but also you know that the Survivor crew has probably got precautions in mind. They're not going to let their contestants get eaten by an alligator.
You don't know that.
I would optimistically hope because I don't think a contestant getting eaten by an alligator or getting attacked is going to be great for their wanting more people to come in and go on this show.
You don't know. You know, there's some masochists out there.
That's
but
true.
Speaking of things in the water and piranhas specifically, one of the moments that doesn't get talked about near enough, because they didn't even get mentioned in the reunion, and it was during the piranha feeding frenzy immunity challenge. And like they can't use their hands. They all have to like bite this meat down and tear it off and then put it in the thing. There was a specific moment where Heidi and Roger are on the same team. Heidi's got just a very little bit in her mouth and she can't get it out. And Roger comes up. He's like, here, let me help. And like, I know he's trying to like pull it out, but he pretty much flat out like Frenches her. Like a huge open mouth, over her mouth to try and get it, and like it still doesn't work. But I'm just like, I wrote that down for my notes as I'm watching it. I'm like, Roger just totally came over and kissed Heidi, and no one's saying anything about this.
Yeah. Well, you know that Heidi would have brought it up if she was creeped out by it. So I think maybe it was just like the adrenaline of the challenge. But that is a good point, and I forgot about that until you mentioned it.
And I do agree. It's an adrenaline. I'm not trying to like say anything about Roger.
Oh, yeah.
It is an adrenaline of the challenge moment. But I'm like, you slow it down and you take a moment. That's 100% what it was. Accidentally, but that's what it was.
But I mean, let's just say, would Roger have done that to Matt or Rob?
Another fair point too. I don't know. Rob would have. No, I don't know. But speaking of Rob, I like his quote in the reunion. I know that we're not at reunion moments yet, and we can talk about. We can move into that if we want. But when like they first introduced Rob in the reunion, it's like Rob, and like you were kind of like the hornball there, and all these girls like you were like, oh, I wish but no one paid attention. It's like, did you get more attention after the show? He's like, yeah, I've got good news and bad news. Good news is I've got a girlfriend. Bad news, she doesn't believe a word I say. Like, that's a great Rob joke.
Which going forward, because I've gotten to know Rob listening to his podcast, he is still married to that girlfriend that he talked about, and they have 2 kids since then.
Oh, good for him. Especially for a weird looking dude like Rob is.
Yeah, like you mentioned, I did not remember how creepy Rob kind of is, because I feel like he makes a ton of comments about like oh, we got toothpaste and nobody wants to make out with me, or like oh man, if these girls walk around naked, I'm never gonna vote them out. And I mean, a lot of it is joking, and he is kind of like the jokester, but he also makes way more perverted comments than anybody else.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's a thirsty season of Survivor, and also that's the stuff that they choose to say. I'm not saying, hey, that's a fine thing, but it's like, this dude, he's away from any physical contact of a woman for this many days, and they're just highlighting the jokes he makes. But he absolutely does kind of give off that energy, and I'm like, I feel a little cringe for you to be saying these things.
Yeah. No, I felt the same way. Like going into the season, I remembered the season more fun. Like I don't like the season as much as I thought I would, but I do like the season a lot more than seasons 4 and 5. Just because 4 and 5 were not that interesting, I think.
Yeah, I agree. This season was a step up from that, but next season is great. Let's talk about some reunion stuff, and then we can talk about other seasons.
I try to think. There really weren't a ton of standout moments in the reunion, but you can tell they're still in the moment in the area where they're trying to give everybody a chance to talk.
Yeah,
even like the early votes, and then I think at the very end,
Roger,
until the very very end, they're like, "Oh crap, Roger!" What did they ask him at the very end?
He is like, "Hey, have you and Dan buried the hatchet?" Yeah, we're good, and they like give a hug. That's it.
Yeah,
which was funny because after Jenna was named the survivor, everyone comes up to hug her and like say congratulations, but it's like all the people that knew, like, had genuine relationship with her. Yeah. Dan is one of the first ones who comes up too, and so she's hugging all these other people, and Dan's just like standing there waiting for his like hug or whatever. And I'm like, Dan, why do you think you had like you were not on her same tribe? You were out on day 9, and like you have no stake in this, and yet you think you're gonna be one of the first ones to be like, hey, good job. It's like, don't go shoot your shot now. This isn't the time for it.
Yeah. No, I agree. And this one, I'm surprised they didn't do. I could have seen them like pulling out like Jenna or Heidi's audition tapes, but they kind of stopped doing that after a little while.
I think they didn't do audition tapes. They did the back at homes, and then they did a little bit of like Jeff saying Happy Mother's Day to his mom, and the people who they had a house destroyed from a tornado. And yet they had a soundbite about going on Survivor or like watching Survivor. So they're like, let's bring them here. I
thought they were going to be like, well, you know what, CBS, we're going to help you rebuild your house. They're like, no, we're just going to let you come to the Survivor finale. Like I thought that was going to go in a much bigger direction than it was.
It's not Ellen.
No, but Survivor at that time had the money to do stuff.
There was that whole thing, like great on them to be like, hey, let's, there's just some people that we can bless and bring out here to see this, and they showed their Survivor fans. Okay, cool. The segment still ended up falling flat, and then following the segment, Jeff stands up to walk on stage, and they don't have a good camera angle of him walking on stage, and so they have to keep like cutting to reaction shots, and then before he sits down, and then eventually he sat down and they still aren't showing on him. He's like, hey over here, and the camera cuts to him. He's like, okay, and then he continues on with it's like it was just so awkward as he's going back to his spot. And a part of it too is the
location change is probably what it was.
Yeah, and it was a weird segue because like these people just lost their home from the hurricanes. Well, we in New York had some rain and we couldn't meet in the park. Like, I get that they're weather related, but you're comparing people losing their homes to, oh no, you couldn't shoot on site at the park and you had to be at the CBS building. Oh no.
It's like The Office when Oscar's like, they took my laptop, and Kevin's like, well, I'm going to be prone to surges.
Correct. I think I was leaving you the opportunity for reunion moments to bring up Jeff Probst on a jet ski, but since you haven't brought it up, I'm going to bring it up.
I totally forgot about that part.
How can you forget? Like, okay, so I definitely remembered this moment. I remembered specifically him stopping from the Statue of Liberty, but I, for whatever reason, thought it was closer to 9/11 when he did that, because this aired in May of 2003. And so it had been a year and a half. It still was in that post 9/11 early era before kind of the patriotism shift, which honestly, like a lot of that was the war on terror and the Iraqi war, and like so the sentiment shifted during that conflict. But following 9/11, until that war went on too long, there was a lot more solidarity and patriotism. And I even talked about it with Survivor Thailand when they introduced Ken. It's like, this is a New York City police officer, and they're like, oh, let's applaud for him. It's like, there's just the survivors here. You're going to be voting them out eventually. You don't have to applaud. But like, there was just that feeling, that sentiment. So I remember like that was a good moment. You go by the Statue of Liberty, let's honor, hey, America, yay. But the whole idea of it still was a ridiculous concept. Whereas like, I can't open these votes today. I'll see you later. Goes, hops on his jet ski. They cut to like him on the jet ski coming into New York Harbor. Like, he rode a freaking jet ski all the way from South America up to New York. Like, what? What? That's so stupid.
You have great gas mileage. I mean,
he didn't even have to stop once.
Get your jet ski from Yamaha.
He's got an arc reactor in there way before Tony Stark ever did it.
Yeah. I love the gimmicks like that, because like by now we all know that the finales are live, but when they do that, or when they like pretend like, oh, are we still on the island, and then lights up, no, we're here. Like, we know, but it's a fun gag. I like it.
I don't remember what Ryan said about it, because Ryan, when they called on him for the one thing he did, he used it real quick to mock Jeff's jet ski thing. I can't remember what he says, but I'm like, this is what you're doing with your 5 seconds in this reunion? You're going to mock that? All right.
Yeah.
Your choice, man.
Yeah. And they said it was on Mother's Day. So, I mean, they don't, I'm not sure when this went away, but for the longest time, Survivor was always airing on either Wednesday or Thursday, but the finales were always Sunday nights because it was always a big deal. So they always had the Sunday night finale because people were going to be home more, because it was like a 3-hour finale, because it was the last 4 or 5 people going into the finale. So you'd have a 2-hour episode plus the hour-long finale.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know where they're doing it, how they do it now. I don't know where they're. I sound like Dave now all of a sudden.
Yeah. Well, when the last season that I watched live was season 41, which was a little while ago, but it was just
those numbers, man.
I know, 2 a year for 20 years.
That's fair.
They're on like season 48 now, so I have missed some seasons, but it's just on a Thursday again. It's just on the same night as it is now. I mean, it's still a long finale, but it's not on a different night anymore.
Yeah, because it's not an event.
No.
All right. Well, we talked a little about other seasons, and we compared it. Definitely is better than the previous 2. not as good. Africa and Australia are fantastic.
Yeah.
I was never like so big on the original Survivor season 1, and so this is probably a little worse than that one, but it's still it's comparable to season 1 in my opinion.
I like season 1, but I don't have. I think it's definitely worse than 2. The 2 and 3 are the best that we've watched so far, I think.
Yep.
But there are some great personalities in the original one, which save it, and so I definitely think 1, 2, 3, 6 are the best out of those.
Yeah,
and
to the casting credits, like that's really what you need. You need to find the good personalities, and like to me, I think nothing's going to beat the cast of season 2. Like even though next season has my favorite cast member, it's still like the majority of season 2, like the people on that were just really good personalities to me.
There are some. I would agree and disagree. Like, I think so far, yes, 2 is the best, but there are some really great seasons. I think season 12 specifically was a great season with a great cast. So we're a ways away from there, but like there are some good ones coming up.
Well, there you go. So speaking of next season, we're definitely going to watch and review the Pearl Islands season 7. This, as I've been saying all along, this is my favorite season. All Stars might be my favorite season, but this is a season I really liked. And that was all because of one guy, Rupert. And so I'm not going to, like, when we're doing the predictions of, hey, this is what I remembered. I remember a lot more stuff with Rupert, so I won't go into, like, all the stuff, but I just remember even in that initial episode when they are supposed to barter for stuff, and they all think they're on a photo shoot to begin the whole thing, and so they're all dressed to the nines, and they get to this market, and they're like, well, you have to kind of figure out like trading system and get the stuff you're going to need for your camp, and you have this much time. And so then like Austin, the I think it is a black lawyer, he pretty much went down to his underwear and sold like all of his clothes to get stuff for them, but they all left their stuff together, and Rupert's like, we're pirates. We steal. So he took all the shoes of the other tribe and he relocated their stuff, and he was the guard of theirs. So the other tribe was just like, oh, I'm just going to trust this guy will watch everything.
Yeah, which not smart to trust someone on the other tribe with your belongings.
They didn't know what they're getting into.
So like that, I know the season very well, so I'm not trying to spoil things. So what else do you, without spoiling, like this is the winner, what else do you remember from season 7?
I remember Rupert didn't win.
Yep.
I was sad. I remembered, like I said, the Austin, the guy who like went down to his underwear, he quit because he got that was a dumb decision to just try and be naked for 39 days. And he's like, I'm so miserable. It's terrible. I need clothes. So he quits. He's the first survivor to quit. And of course, remember Johnny Fairplay, and specifically that reward challenge that both you and I know about, but him specifically, like just his demeanor and how he was.
There's, and this is the tease, I won't say it in case I don't know if you remember it or not, or if the listeners don't remember it. There's another very big first that happens in season 7. That if I say even more about it, it could give it away, but I don't want to. We'll talk about that next time. So that's a tease. But yeah, there's a lot of good contestants, good memorable contestants. We talked about Rupert, Austin, Johnny Fairplay, Sandra is another memorable person.
Who's like the de facto leader on the other tribe from Rupert? Who I think it was on the other tribe, and he didn't really want to be, but they all wanted him to be leader. And then he starts acting like leader, and they're like, "Oh, well, who's this guy who's just our self-proclaimed leader?"
That is Andrew Savage.
All right, him. I remember him.
Yep, and so here's the big jump: season 7, and then you'll see Andrew Savage again in season 31.
I remember the challenge where I think it was Andrew that was up there, but Andrew versus Rupert, and they had the sticks in their back, and they were slowly putting on weight. Andrew had like Rupert had a ton of weight on his back.
Yeah.
Didn't it break? Or maybe they redid that in All Stars, and it broke on that one.
They've done that challenge a couple times. It might be this one, but there's one where before the contestant gives up or has to, like the bar breaks. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that's in that one or if it's in a future season.
I think this is also the season. There's an immunity challenge for the teams. And I think again, I just remember these Rupert moments where I think Rupert is down below where it's like the put your mouth against like a tube thing underwater, and that's how you breathe and lungs can stay down there. And I think they all go down, and all of his other guys on the team go up immediately. And he's the only one left. I think that's this season with Rupert.
Okay.
Am I right? Be. Or because I know they did that in Thailand. They did that same challenge, but I can't remember. We'll see. Maybe it's not.
Yeah, I don't remember the specific seasons, but I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think. I don't remember that, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Well, when you hear this on this episode, when we're talking about Pearl Island, I will talk about how wrong or right that assumption was.
So
I might be like, booyah, I remember things, or I'll be like, I have no idea.
Well, I'm sure you remember it. It just you might be remembering a different season if it's not Pearl Islands.
Yeah, like the thing from Survivor Amazon where Jeff rides in on a jet ski and stops in front of the Statue of Liberty. I thought that was an earlier season, but nope, It was in Amazon.
Yeah, and then so when I'm talking about the big first that happens next season, do you know what I'm talking about, or do you not know?
I can't remember.
Okay, then I'm going to keep my mouth shut because then you can watch and be surprised along with everybody else.
Yeah, the two firsts that I mentioned of the not telling them that they're starting the game now versus the Austin quitting. Those are the two firsts that I remembered.
Yeah.
So that's what we remember about Pearl Island, and we'll see next episode how right we were. Next Survivor episode.
Yep, the next episode is also a very patriotic episode.
It is. So, a couple weeks, it's 4th of July, so we are going to talk about a show we haven't talked about yet. Both Brian and I, we binge watched The West Wing. We've never talked about that before, so we're like, we need to talk about The West Wing. It's classic television, and in our modern day politics, The West Wing is a fairy tale of how this idealized version of how politics should be. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, you kind of just want everyone to act with honor and decorum and with the best interests in heart, and to only disagree when it comes to policy and not for any personal things. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to get real sad.
That is very, very true. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about trivia from last week, because last week we talked about Lost.
We talked about there was an episode that they switched mid-production as to who the episode was about. And what episode was that? That is season 2, episode 2, the episode called Adrift, where it's all about Michael and Sawyer on the remnants of what's left of the raft after being blown up. And the flashback is a Michael flashback about him losing custody of Walt. But originally it was going to be a Sawyer flashback. And I believe they were going to bring back Robert Patrick and talk about his past with Sawyer. But then for whatever reason, they decided to change that, and they switched to being a Michael episode instead of a Sawyer episode.
I bet that they're probably going to answer what was the Tampa job that he referenced in Outlaws.
I believe it was, yeah.
Yeah. And instead they're like, we don't need to know. We can just know that they have shared history. That's fine.
Yeah.
All right. And then trivia for this week.
Yep. Our winner from Survivor Season 6, the Amazon, Jenna, ended up marrying a previous Survivor contestant. So someone who was on Survivor Seasons 1 through 5, one of those seasons, ended up marrying Jenna. And who is that?
Richard Hatch.
It's not. I was just going to say it's not Richard Hatch.
Too late. BB from Season 1.
Yes, of course it is.
All right. Well, that's it. That's all we got for Survivor Amazon. And so I'm going down to Costa Rica. Oh, no, I already came back from Costa Rica when this plays out. And Costa Rica's not even in South America. But I'm going to be close to Panama, where Survivor Pearl Islands is filmed. So that's why I'm talking about Costa Rica all of a sudden. I don't know. I'm excited, guys. I haven't actually gone on the trip yet.
Well,
so it's going to be good.
If you think that's a big trip, by the time you listen to this, listeners, I will have had family from Arizona come up to Minnesota, and we're all going to go to Valley Fair together.
Woohoo!
So, take that.
I will. I'm taking it. right in the nose. All right. Well, we got big things on the horizon, and we'll be praying for your family in Arizona, because as I was talking with another friend of mine, Arizona is an affront to God. It should not exist. It lives on the face of the sun. The people who built the city of Phoenix are trying to give the Lord the middle finger by saying we will live here despite the hell that you put us in. And so, Arizona, it's not for everyone.
I will say I've gone down to visit my family in Phoenix a few times over the years. I will not go in July or August.
Exactly. They're like, the fact that it exists is a testament to the stubbornness of man. Like, why do you live here? Like, we are not moving.
We say that, but on the other end, we have like negative 20-degree weather in the winter sometimes.
But we don't have scorpions and snakes that try and kill us in our sleep. So,
fair point.
We just have mosquitoes the size of a tomato. All right. Well, that's it. Survivor, watch it. It's great. Watch next time for West Wing. In the meantime, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.